if we're going to look at this, we should look at it with honest eyes. Why did we get to a point where Catholic Relief Services has such a significant amount of money coming in from the U.S. government that by taking that away, 50% of the staff is expected to leave? And say similar things with Catholic Charities. Like, why do we have Catholic Charities, not necessarily Catholic Charities, but as a whole, all nonprofit organizations that have Catholic in their name? Why do so many of them rely on government funding? Well, that's like an interesting dynamic when you think about it. For a lot of them, it's because they were originally laity and they got big and bloated and did, good things, right? Like, when Catholic Relief Services, when something happens, they send resources over to help with the tragedy that happened, right? Like, so it's known to actually, do what it says it does. The problem is obviously government funding, but also what somebody like Mike at the Lepanto Institute has shown through his reporting in journalism, that some of their, like by the tune of millions of dollars, provides funding for things that are very anti-Catholic, and so, or like antithetical to Catholicism. And so Catholic Charities, like, they have the accusation that they brought over a bunch of illegal immigrants, and they're getting, that's one of the reasons why they're being targeted now. And so I'm not asking you to give an opinion on either side of those issues per se. It's just fundamentally, when it comes to government funding, provided to a nonprofit, there is the notion of, you don't bite the hand that feeds. You don't, where you're getting your money, you don't typically respond critically because you want to keep getting that money. And so, it creates this dynamic within the government and the church, the local church, that the government is influencing the church in an unhealthy way. And I think the Lepanto Institute was showing cases like that, where there was an unhealthy influence from the government to promote certain services that are not in line with Catholic teaching. And so you have this case of basically this nationalistic Catholic application from a government that is not Catholic, but seems to promote, historically, run by the Democratic Party, things that are very anti-Catholic. And so when, again, when you have like a conservative that's fairly Catholic, or someone in charge of giving the grants and money, and they're passing out the grants, they're going to pass grants, probably in line with Catholic thought, or at least one would hope. Those that are not Catholic, or maybe Catholic in name only, or they grew up Catholic but they're not Catholic anymore. I mean, like, there's a whole bunch of variations to this. You're going to have a lot of like things just spread all the way around. You're going to have an influence that is not good on the church, because now you have the government funding, which that organization now relies on to be influenced by the strings from that administration. And so this will create a dynamic that it's very similar to what a lot of us Catholics have for like certain Orthodox churches, where their national government influences their theological applications. And we'll criticize that because you end up compromising. It's not that you're making the best of a bad situation, it's that you're purposely betting into that situation, and you're not pushing for the outcome that we're supposed to strive for. You're kind of just settling. And that's very much, I'm not going to talk about which ones. Most of you would probably know which one, like one in particular that kind of stands out above the rest, although there are others that have a similar problem. But the so like that's all I wanted to say, is I wanted to emphasize that when it comes to us as Catholics, like we very much care about where our money goes, right? Like a lot of us withhold money from the bishops because they're either not transparent or they have a slew of bankruptcy like situations they have to deal with before like any of our money actually gets applied in any practical sense. Um, I did forget my new mascot. So well, actually, I didn't forget my new mascot. I just thought this wasn't an appropriate video to have this start out. So I do have a new mascot, and I will show it next time, and you'll like it, hopefully. But basically, this idea of you know, when a Catholic charity becomes reliant on the government, more than likely over time, that government will influence that Catholic agency on things that that government should not be doing. And so ideally, the Catholic organization should be getting its money from the laity or non-government entities to maintain its autonomy from the government and from that type of coercion. On top of that, that also that also emphasizes to us as the laity that we do need to donate to such organizations, right? Like we do need to donate to something like Catholic Relief Services because that is a real need when it happens. Like when something does happen and you want your money to go to relieving, say floods in a particular area, earthquakes, whatever. Like that's a good cause to donate. There's nothing wrong with the cause itself. The problem is how the organization spends its money. And you can go a little bit into it, like where it's like, okay, well, maybe the executive board is getting paid way too much money. It is a nonprofit. It is not a. I'm a pretty big stickler when it comes to nonprofits. Like, if you are a nonprofit, you shouldn't be getting paid what like $500,000. So I don't care if you're the head of it. It is a nonprofit, and if the company isn't profiting, the people who are in the company should not be making that much money for any individual. So that's just my opinion. You can agree with that, disagree with. I mean, you can disagree with the whole thing that I'm saying, but it's. I'm just giving you my perspective on that. So there's more than one dimension at play here. But in particular, I'm fairly happy with the cuts happening because I think what it'll do is it'll cause the USCCB in a good way to look to the laity for support and asking them to do good things. Now, I think this will ultimately start a conversation. Like, hopefully it does, and hopefully people like the laity take this seriously, and they're not just, no, nothing the bishops are going to do is a good thing. Like, no, that's not an appropriate reaction. If you're going to have these cuts, okay, and then if the USCCB is going to come out and say, hey, we would like more donations from the laity, that's the beginning of a beginning of a conversation. We can start saying, okay, well, we'd like more transparency. We'd like to make sure that the organizations which we do fund do not get funded by the government in a long-term fashion in any sense. It's one thing to get maybe like a bulk sum, like maybe a bulk payment, right? Like for relief services. But to continuously rely on that in the way that some of these organizations have relied on it, it's prone to corruption. And so we as the laity really want this to be for the laity, like not for the laity, but for the sake of the gospel, right? Like, and to promote what the church promotes herself, not what a government group wants to promote. And so, we'd like more transparency. If we see something, don't pretend like we're stupid. Okay. Like, again, like I think the Lepanto Institute did a great job for like the last decade showing that CRS was doing something it wasn't supposed to be doing. And it was like, nobody cared. That should not happen. Like, you either, like, if we're going to say we believe what the Catholic Church teaches, and you have a small nonprofit clearly moving against the Catholic Church in certain policies, and someone points it out to you, it shouldn't take the government being reorganized to get to this point. I mean, we're literally all adults here. We all understand how, like, these things play out. Pretending that we aren't paying attention, or we don't know what we're talking about, or that, for example, the Ponto Institute isn't credible. Like, he's literally citing the tax documents and where the money goes. Like, this is, like, fairly straightforward. If you're worried about the blowback will be bigger from the laity if we find out these things are happening in ways that you, like, that are just bad, right? Like, it won't promote us to, in a fervent manner, to push our kids to go into ordination, right? Or to move into religious life. We may be hesitant to send our kids to Catholic schools. I mean, they definitely need to get revamped in terms of what they're doing, especially in light of, like, what's happening in a lot of public schools. I don't know why that isn't a priority. Like, these are fairly simple things to understand, and yet we try to make them as complicated as possible. For what reason? To do nothing? Like, you're putting more work. And I'm not talking to the bishops in particular, but there are definitely um, they definitely have an influence here. Like, we as the laity want to look at you as our spiritual fathers and act like it, right? Like, we want to give you our money to help the church. That is one of the precepts of the church. The problem, though, is if we don't know where that money is going, or there's a lot of excuse making, or people aren't addressing our concerns in a rightful way, in a just way, there's going to be a lot of us that just don't give money in that way. And they will give money to other parts of the body that are doing those things. And so, like, I'm not saying this lightly. Like, this is a fairly serious point. Like, we as the laity, and I don't know how often, like, I don't know if this is going to get to, like, bishops or people of high influence, but it is, like, important to recognize that there are people who, like, agree with me. Like, I'm not thinking outside of the box so much that this is, like, a crazy thing. Like, government funding should not be what the Church of the United States relies on. It should be relying on the laity. How do you get the laity to help you? You give them transparency. How do you give them transparency? I mean, it's pretty, like, if that conversation needs to happen, like, we can have it, but it's like that is, like, where this needs to go. Because we are so bogged down with so many problems that the church has had over the last 25 years. Like, I have not had a single time as an adult Catholic, as someone who had their confirmation or his confirmation until now, where I didn't constantly have the sex crisis brought up. And then a bunch of bankruptcies happen for the diocese, and then money's going this, that, and the other way. Like, these are, like, serious concerns that people like me and others have. The difference is I'm still in the church and I still give money, and I make sure my parish gets what my parish should get. Like, the difference is that those other ones that don't trust you, they left. They're gone. You need to win them back. And like, you win them back with trust and actions of trust. And that's definitely one of them, is just to be transparent with your financial documents. So yeah, this is pretty heated for me, because me and a friend of mine and I will discuss this, and, like, this is a constant theme that comes up, because so much would be solved if the US CCB and the organizations that fall under it that are nonprofits would just be transparent, recognize in humility, like, the critiques that they have coming from people outside their organizations that are Catholic, that are faithful, and that are not just pulling their strings, and that they would address those concerns as opposed to trying to play some sort of weird middle ground. I mean, I have no idea what's happening, but it just seems like it's this weird middle ground where it's just avoiding the problem. So I'll get off my soapbox, but I wanted to say this because this is a moment to capture. This is a moment to do something, and it's a moment, like historically, even though the government shouldn't influence the Catholic Church financially, historically, starting, even with the Council of Nicaea, right, where we've had a civil leader like push the people, push the bishops to addressing like certain things. Like Constantine did that, right? Like the Council of Nicaea was called by him. He didn't mess with the theological departments, but he definitely invited the bishops, right? And then things were settled and we got the Nicene Creed. Like it was great. It like this is like not a bad thing. And the recognition that God will use civil leaders like that. And I'm not saying like Trump is some sort of like Constantine. That's not what I'm saying. In terms of stature. But is it a similar moment? Yeah, kind of. Like, but not exactly to the same level. Obviously, like the Nicene Creed's like way up here. Our finances and the trust of the people. It's important, but it's not establishing the symbolon that is the creed. But but it is something that we should take seriously, and it's an opportunity for us as the laity and the USCCB and its organizations to align, to just align, and like we want to be with you, like we want to support you, and we want to like root for you, but we can't do that if you're not going to be transparent with what's going on, or you're not going to take certain criticisms that are completely legitimate, because at the end of the day, it's like, well, like who are you representing at that point? Because it doesn't look like it's the interest of the church. So that's how it looks, and that's how it's been how it's been called out from people that I know that are not part of the Catholic Church, and those that are part of the Catholic Church. So it's not just like me saying this, right? Like this is something that, I mean, it's fairly obvious to people paying attention. All right, so that's it. Now I'm off the soapbox. I will go to the comments section. Yeah, when you're dependent on government money, you feel pressure to maybe bend a little and then a lot in order to keep the money. Right. You don't bite the hand that feeds. The Vatican should have demanded that they take the Catholic out of their name or something at that point, right? Like at that, I mean, if you're gonna like take 50% of your staff, that's not a small amount. Hey Hayes, I hope Saturday is doing well for you. Let's see. Nobody wants to give money to anyone or anything they don't trust, right? And like that's at the end of the day, like that's what ends up being the biggest problem, is just the utter lack of trust the general public, including within the Catholic Church, have for the USCCB nonprofit organizations. And there's a reason why that happened. Like, it's not like people are just inherently prejudiced against nonprofit organizations. People tend to learn like what certain organizations do, how they take the money, and their actions after that money has been taken, and they will follow it. There is very little like, we're not at a point anymore where we have like blind trust, right? Like there's no like, well, donate to the bishop and I'm sure the bishop will do something great for everybody. Like we're at a point where there's accountability that's expected, that like in the secular world, if it wasn't happening, there would be a lot of issues. And for some reason in the Catholic Church in America, there's a certain level of, um, like it comes off as like elitism, clericalism, where it's like it's going to happen. And Pope Francis is very much against that. He's against clericalism. So again, I'm not saying this to make the bishops look bad at all. Like, I think a lot of what I've said is just quite literally public knowledge. When you read it on the forums, doesn't matter if it's a liberal or a conservative forum, politically, like a lot of the people have the same like criticism. Sometimes it's really funny. You'll see some liberals, liberal Catholics, they tend to promote like, rainbow Jesus and stuff like that. Like, sometimes they'll say the USCCB is too conservative, which is very interesting in light of what the conservative will say, which is typically that the USCCB is fairly liberal. And so you just kind of see this like combination of accusations that go across the boat. Like they don't make sense. like there are certain actions that yes, rainbow Jesus, like don't do rainbow, like there are things. Yeah, rainbow Jesus is not good, right? Like that's not a good image. I know people have made depictions of rainbow Jesus. That's not good. There's a political statement in there that shouldn't be reflected in excuse me, with Jesus, because Jesus shouldn't be held down by politics, right? Jesus is above politics. Like he's quite literally above everything. But it's when it comes to America, like we definitely exist in a temporal climate where we have to deal with these questions. And like I said, it's not about making the bishops feel bad. They shouldn't feel bad. We just need to get to work. The laity need to stand up and offer their sacrifices for the needs of the church. The bishops should direct us appropriately. And if something happens, right, like if there's something notable and someone brings it to their attention, it should be addressed immediately, as opposed to kicked down the road or just never addressed. Because at the end of the day, like people, because at the end of the day, people do pay attention, and they don't like that. Like they know when they're being played, and just because they don't have a microphone to, state it, doesn't mean that they don't know that, doesn't mean that they're ignorant of the fact that they're being played. It just means that they don't have the microphone that's getting to your ears. And so you're kind of in the dark on how much people actually trust you. But that's my opinion. Again, like this isn't to bash the bishops. This is to definitely bring to the attention that this should be a point of alignment, not a point of dissension or division. Although I will definitely say I will not be donating to anything that says Catholic Relief Services. I would expect a brand new board and a brand new name. And the board should have good credentials that follow in alignment with Catholic teaching, that are fairly conservative. And when I mean that, I mean like they tend to be Orthodox, and they don't have a history of doing some random LGBT thing, or they said some positive statement about same-sex unions, or a number of things. I mean, like they literally should have a fairly unblemished Orthodox perspective in the public light if they're going to be running a public nonprofit on behalf of the church. We have millions of people in this country that are Catholic, that have those skills. We do not need to rely on just a small minority of them, right? Maybe a million's too much. Like we have hundreds of thousands, if not tens of thousands. So like we definitely have enough people to to find that can absolutely do this. And there are definitely universities that are fairly orthodox that I'm pretty sure would be very easy to find. So, I'm just stating this as someone who really wants to see this succeed. I want to be able to give to something like Catholic Relief Services, um, because at the end of the day, I want to help the church provide its mission and provide the need for the people without compromising on very basic things of the faith, because there's just no need for it. So, um, Hayes, you're absolutely right. Rainbows was God's first, but I'm going to need you to capitalize G. So I'm just, I'm just kidding. Um, and then, all right. So I guess if there's not much going else or not much going on, I guess I'll just leave it at that. I'll give one more question. Oh, yeah, I'll give one more question after I say this. So if you guys have any questions in the comment or a few questions, put it in the comments or in the chat, and I'll get to it. But I wanted to say this. I was going to do a live stream with Father John Brown yesterday. By my voice, you can clearly hear that I'm not sounding well. I'm just getting over something, so I had to cancel, and so we're trying to schedule another time. And he's been very accommodating for that. So I do look forward to having that conversation. It is going to be about the state of the church, and we have some great statistics to go over and talk about. So I'm really excited to talk to someone about statistics, especially from someone like Father John Brown. So I see what you're saying. Blame my iPhone. Well, the first thing is you have an iPhone. So I'm an Android guy, so that's just me doing dishes. No, that's totally good. I mean, I don't. What do you mean? Are you part of conversations online, like while you're doing dishes? I didn't know that. All right, so I guess that's it. I'll get going. I know my throat, my the sound that I'm making is not the most appealing, so I'll get going. But if yeah, I'll just get going. So thanks for watching. And oh my gosh, I keep forgetting. I came up with a catchphrase, and I keep forgetting the catchphrase. I mean, it doesn't help that I got sick, but I'll remember it next time. So, all right, have a great night. Enjoy your weekend.